So yesterday we had an event here, Colorado Feeding Kids, and it was amazing to see our community come together and do this great work. It started with the vision of one person, Earl Hauserman. He was here first service. And he shared it with his men's group, his small men's group, and he assigned my husband Kevin and Michael Tusignet to lead it. Said, you guys are in charge. I expect you to be in charge. And they kind of ran with it. And then we brought in Ken, who's the president and CEO of Colorado Feeding Kids, who goes to Unity Church in Denver. And as a result, we had about, I don't know the final count of how many people. I thought about 85, but somebody said, oh, we had close to 100. So I don't know how many people were in Foss Hall yesterday. And we had lots of assembly lines and put together 25,000 meal kits. It's amazing. And I was asked to do a prayer when we were done, where everybody put their hands on the truck that had all these meal kits in there. And I started out, and if you were here, you know that I broke down and started crying because I was so moved by this community and what we can do when we all come together, and what we can do and what a difference we can make in so many people's lives when we serve and when we act from that place, that spirit that's within us, and what we can do. It was so moving to me. You know, I didn't know before we started talking about this project that 1 in 5 children in Colorado goes hungry. That they don't know when they leave school on Friday where their next meal is going to come from during the weekend. And that's where these kits go to for kids. And I don't know if you're like me, but I could envision, I could see through their eyes as we were talking about this and preparing for this project, see through their eyes of leaving school on Friday and wondering, am I not going to eat again until Monday when I go back to school? And so this project brought an awareness, I think, to us as a community that we all got behind. And we made a huge difference. I'm so proud of all of you that participated. And if you couldn't be here and you contributed financially, thank you. But bringing awareness is what's so important. Bringing awareness to what is needed and how we can help and how we can serve and how we can let that spiritual, divine part of ourselves come out and express, come forth. And so that's why I'm talking about Season for Nonviolence today, because it's an awareness. It's a grassroots awareness campaign that was started by Arun Gandhi and the Association for Global New Thought in 1998. Bringing an awareness. It's a 64-day campaign. It is flanked by the deaths of Gandhi and Martin Luther King. It starts January 30th every year and goes till April 4th. Violence causes more than 1.6 million deaths worldwide each year. And it's one of the leading causes of death in all parts of the world for persons in the ages between 15 and 44. So we need an awareness of this because we can make a difference. We can change this. It doesn't have to be like this. And that's what Season for Nonviolence is all about, bringing this awareness, how we can make a difference, how we can make changes. And we do it by looking at the lives of people that have led these nonviolent actions, like Martin Luther King, like Gandhi, like Nelson Mandela, and many more who have dedicated their lives to people, to the rights of people. open the dialogue and building a bridge is what we're being invited to do with Season for Nonviolence. And it's in perfect alignment with our theme this year, seeing through a spiritual lens, perfect vision, 2020, perfect vision. Because we need to see everyone through a spiritual lens. Focus on our similarities and not the differences, and find ways to build bridges with people who don't look like us, don't think like us, don't believe like us. Our Peace Through Music concert that Janice started in 2016 when she first arrived here, she brought this great awareness to us of the Season for Nonviolence. And she's been holding this Peace Through Music concert every year since, and it's a great example of bringing together different races of people, different faiths, and celebrating our love of music, celebrating how we can open hearts with music. It's a beautiful example of, like she says, acting locally, thinking globally. So if you haven't gotten your tickets yet, there's not many left, so better get them today because it's this Saturday. On a larger scale, I watched a documentary the other day called Confronting the Truth. And it tells a story of different countries where massive human rights violations have occurred. The conflicts have ended in these countries, but the pain and the memories persist. And these countries need a place where they can know a shared truth for the healing to begin. Because in these places where these massive human rights violations have occurred, because of media and loud voices, not everyone believed that it actually happened. And so some of these governments have commissioned a group of people to look into it, to start this healing process, and they call it the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. It helps society face a painful past and chart a new course that's filled with opportunities. The first successful one was in Argentina in 1983. There were several before that attempted but didn't quite get to what they were hoping to do. But in the movie, they showed South Africa, and this one started in 1995 in working with the victims and perpetrators of apartheid. They brought together 17 people on this commission, this Truth and Reconciliation Commission that the government mandated. And Bishop Desmond Tutu was the head of this committee, the head of this commission. He said it was hell to do this. Because what they did was they asked people for testimonies, the victims and the perpetrators. They asked for testimonies, and they received 21,000 testimonies from victims of apartheid. And they received 7,000 requests and testimonies of those who were perpetrators, who wanted amnesty. And in 1996, they started having public hearings where people were given the microphone and allowed to share their story. And it was painful to listen to some of these stories. But it was important for the victims of apartheid to be able to speak, to be able to share what they experienced, to be able to share their stories without anyone interrupting them, telling them it didn't happen, judging them. This is where Desmond Tutu said it was hell. It's difficult to accept the truth And he said, but we wept together. There's lots of crying going on while these stories are being shared. But it set the record straight on what happened to the victims, gave them a chance to be heard, which is so important in the healing process, to be heard. And it's important for everyone else to see what really did happen. The 7,000 perpetrators who applied for amnesty, they had two conditions. They had to admit their wrongdoing, and they had to prove that they were getting political favor for their acts. Only about 10 to 12% of the perpetrators actually got amnesty because they either weren't willing to admit their wrongdoing or claim that they had political gains as a result. The rest of them had to face their crimes, answer for their crimes. South Africa became a model for future commissions, future Truth and Reconciliation Commissions after this, because it gave a voice to the people. People who didn't trust each other had to learn how to start working together again and living together again. It goes intergenerational. These things go on for many generations if they're not healed. Desmond Tutu said, too, we go about forgiving by looking the beast in the eye, which is the same, is true for us, that we have to acknowledge emotions that we're feeling. We have to acknowledge conflicts that are going on in our head. We have to acknowledge them, look the beast in the eye, and not push them aside. We have to work through them, not ignore them, not deny them. Find a way to move forward with peace. That's the goal. But what does it require of us? So often we get stuck. We get stuck in our stuff. We're unwilling to look through the eyes of spirit or turn the other cheek, as Jesus would say, metaphysically, meaning look at it from a different perspective. Look at it through the eyes of someone else if we want that peace. Jesus says in the book of Matthew, chapter 10, verse 34, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace to the earth. I have not come to bring peace, but a sword." Everybody love that quote? That can be a really tricky one to understand literally. So we have to look at it metaphysically. So metaphysically, keep that up there, Susan. Metaphysically, the earth, that's the key in this scripture. Whenever it says the earth or the world, we're talking about sense consciousness. We're talking about earthly realms. We're talking about worldly, not spirit, the human side of us. And so Jesus representing that Christ consciousness does not bring peace to a earthly consciousness that is stuck. The earthly consciousness is stuck in its status quo and all its manifestations that have arisen out of that consciousness. So we want peace, we want abundance, we want love, we want joy. But don't make me change my attitude. Don't make me change my beliefs. I want it to have it just the way I am, but that's not what Jesus is saying in this scripture. Peace doesn't come to us in those stuck places. Peace doesn't come to us if we're not willing to change and grow and expand and evolve. We have to be willing to look beyond where it's my way, my own personal way. So, but came to brought a sword. The sword is that which cuts through that, destroys that way of thinking, that my way of thinking. The sword is also double-sided. Swords have an edge on both sides. And so on the one side, we are stuck to the past, stuck to those stories of the past, not denying that they happened, but stop giving them power. In unity, we would say that's a denial. Stop giving those stories power. And the other side of the sword, cut open a way to see all the possibilities, all the opportunities that are always there. And they're always there. So not peace to a consciousness that is stuck, but a sword that lets us cut past the past. Cut the past. Live in the present and be open to the future. And we have a lasting peace of mind when we do this. We have the peace that comes from the divine, not the earthly or worldly consciousness. We're invited to see ourselves and see others through the spiritual lens. It requires us to grow, to use a sword. It's not always an easy thing to do. There's an ebb and flow to life. There's an ebb and flow to relationships. There's an ebb and flow to joy. There's a time for everything. And so when we're in the ebb part, it's not easy to stay on the spiritual path. And it's important to have somebody who can listen without judgment. I've been in an ebb state lately. Fortunately, I have a spiritual director, excuse me, who listens. So I got to talk to her on Friday, and I told her my challenges. I told her my story. And she repeated it back to me. And this is where the healing process starts, being able to share your story with somebody who doesn't judge, somebody who just brings love. And she always asks me the question, so frustrating sometimes, where's God in this? Where is God in this? We're not denying the circumstances, we're not denying the emotions that we're feeling, but what's under that? What's the truth under that? Where is God under that? And the God is always there. There's so much more God in us than we will ever be aware of in this lifetime. There's so much more brilliance in each of you than you'll ever know. But so much of our conflict in life is in our own heads. And so much of it is because we want things to be perfect, and we decide how perfect looks. You know, we wouldn't grow without challenges. And so bless the challenges. Damn it. But it's, you know, but we grow through these challenges. We grow when we can look at them from a broader perspective and work through them. But what happens when we're, historically what happens when we're confronted by people who think and believe differently than we do is we've turned to war and violence as society, globally. I was reading this book this week that I came across through the Association for Global New Thought website called Not in God's Name. Yeah, I could use one of those. It's empty. Thanks. Thank you. Not in God's Name is written by Paula Fau. So she was, in this, I don't remember the year, it may have been the 80s, early 80s, late 70s. She was heading to India. And when she got there, what had happened was the Prime Minister of India, and I can't remember her first name, I didn't type it up. Indira Gandhi. No relation to Gandhi that we all know, the Gandhi that we all talk about. She was assassinated by the Sikhs. And so there were many days of unrest in India as a result of this. And she was afraid for her life. She got to her hotel, there was lots of looting and violence being performed right on the streets of New Delhi, and she was able to get a flight back out that night, very middle of the night. But it went on for many days, and she was greatly affected by this because she knew and had lots of friends in India, friends who were Sikhs, and if you were a Sikh at that time, during those days, you weren't safe. So she started thinking about all these conflicts that happen as a result of religion. And it was really disturbing to her. So she did this documentary, which I haven't been able to see, but I did get the book. And she says this: "This is a time when war is no longer viable. No one can win any wars. It should be time for dialogue. And violence should be ruled out as a way of resolving conflict because it only generates more conflict, which is the teaching of Jesus, Buddha, Krishna, all of the great teachers of humanity. That hatred breeds hatred, violence breeds violence, and only non-violence can overcome it. Only love can overcome hatred." It's so true. We have the ability to stop the violence. It may not seem like it. It may seem like a huge task, and it is. But it starts one person at a time. It starts with us. It starts with us. Being aware of the conflicts that go on inside our own consciousness and choosing love instead. It requires radical empathy. It requires us to look through the eyes of someone else. And so several years ago, there was an organization came together as a nonprofit called Narrative 4. And they believe that by telling stories, we can heal the planet. And so in December of 2016, they brought together, they collaborated with New York Magazine, and they brought together some people who were extreme in their beliefs on guns, gun control. Now, this isn't a story about gun control. This is about empathy. And so they brought in people who were pro-guns and people who were anti-guns or pro-gun control. And they paired them up so that they could tell their stories to each other. And so the first day they did this, they paired them up, and you were sitting right across from somebody who believes totally the opposite that you do on this issue. And you had to share your story. And that was on Friday. And they had to sit with that or sleep on that, had the whole evening to think about the other person's story. And then the next day, they got together and each one had to tell their partner's story to the big group from the first person. They were putting themselves in someone else's shoes, literally, through their eyes, seeing through someone else's eyes. And it was very powerful. There's a 20-minute documentary. I'm not showing that. We don't have time for that, but the link will be on the update this week. I'm going to show just a small part of it in a minute, but very powerful. And we're not trying to change anyone's mind. We're not trying to change anyone's beliefs. We're just bringing awareness so that there can be understanding and there can be respect. That we all have different beliefs, and that's okay. But to stop the conflict, the violence. So there were two people in particular in this documentary who were really at different ends of this. Carolyn Tuft was from Salt Lake City, and she was a survivor of a mass shooting at a mall. And Todd Underwood is a gun advocate and has a website where they facilitate the purchase of guns, sale of guns. And he's from Kansas City, and these two were paired up. So when they had to tell their story from the first person, they really understood why the other believed the way they did. Carolyn went first, and she told Todd's story, and she said, "My name is Todd, and I was abused by my father, and I've never felt safe. And I have MS, and people with disabilities are targeted as victims of violence much more frequently than anyone else. I have a wife and 2 kids, and I'm afraid for them, and I have a gun with me at all times because I don't feel safe unless I do. My father taught me at a young age that the person that was the strongest, had the strongest punch, won. And I don't want that to happen to my family. My name is Todd." Then Todd got up and shared Carolyn's story, and that's where we'll watch this.
My name is Carolyn. I'm an artist, was self-employed. I had my own company. What I was most proud of in my life was is I was a mother. I loved my kids. I had 2 boys and 2 girls. My daughter, Kirsten, was a social butterfly, an amazing woman, had a heart of gold. It was near Valentine's Day. She wanted to go get some cards for some of her friends. So we went to the mall in Salt Lake City. We hear a loud bang. We didn't know what it was. And then I saw the shooter stand in front of me. He shot me in my arm. And I was on the ground, and he shot me again in the back. And then I watched him put the shotgun against my daughter's head and ended her life. I complained to my daughter about her messy room at times. I would give anything to be able to have a messy room again. My name is Carolyn.
Very powerful. Now, neither of them changed their beliefs, but they have a deep, deep understanding of each other's beliefs and respect for why they believe the way they do. It opened their eyes, seeing through someone else's eyes. So think about someone with whom you may be in conflict. Someone who doesn't believe as you believe. Someone who's on the other side of an issue. And you both feel strongly about it. But are you willing to have radical empathy? Would you be willing to share their story from the first person to better understand? And if you saw through their eyes, how would that change how you feel about them? The season for nonviolence is meant to bring awareness. Awareness that we can make a difference. That violence doesn't have to be the answer. That we can look within and allow ourselves to see through someone else's eyes, see through the eyes of spirit, see with an expanded view, see through that spiritual lens. And we have everything we need to not have violence rule the media, rule the day, if we are willing to do the work. And it starts one person at a time, starts in us. We can have lasting peace if we do the work. And not just tolerate people, because when we say we're tolerating people, we're saying my way's better, but I'll put up with you. No, it's about accepting and respecting. Way more than tolerating. If we do the work. There's a handout when you leave the sanctuary, if you're interested. It's from the Association for Global New Thought website. It's one side is the principles of nonviolence, and the other side of it is a call to action. We may need more copies. I see Papa picking it up. There's only one. We'll make some more copies. A call to action, and how are you using nonviolent principles in your life? One of the principles is enlarging our capacity to embrace differences and appreciate the value of every human life. Martin Luther King Jr. said, "Nonviolence is a powerful and just weapon which cuts without wounding and ennobles the man who wields it. It is a sword that heals." Let's look at where we're using that sword or not using that sword and make a difference. Thank you. Namaste.